Hi everyone, so in this tutorial I really want to talk about operator, and I want to demystify it because I feel is one of the most powerful synthesizers in Ableton Live, and I think it's worth knowing and understanding how to use it. This is a beginner's introduction to operator in a sense. I'm not going to go into too much of the theory behind FM, but I'm going to go into more of an experiential sort of approach to it. So let's get going, and I hope you guys enjoy the tutorial. Right, so as you can see here, I just got a basic project. It's just got some drums that sound like this, right? And then I just got operators. So let's start by creating a bass sound. One thing about operator that you guys need to understand is that operator works very different from any other synthesizer. In subtractive synthesizers, what we can do is we can subtract, we can take energy away. So in the typical synth, what we do, imagine you have like something like that's like noise. And what you do is you use the filter to take energy away from it, right? The same thing if you, I don't know, like if you can see here, we can select a sawtooth, right? And then you can see that I can use the filter to take energy away from the sawtooth and make it more mellow, right? And if I play it quite low, you see as I'm taking energy away, eventually becomes a bass sound, right? So that's the principle behind it. But in FM, what we're doing is we take in the energy of one oscillator and we are applying it to another. So what we're doing is we're modulating the pitch. So how it works is it's a little bit like this. So you take an LFO and you can see that the LFO is affecting the pitch of A, right? And as I increase the amount, you can see the pitch starts to wobble, right? You can see, I mean, if I slow it down, it's got a little bit higher. You can see that movement, right? That's the LFO doing its job, right? And this is the amount, is how far the pitch is going to travel, right? That's how it is, right? But if we start speeding up the rate, what happens is that instead of hearing a pitch going up and down, eventually the movement is going to get so fast that we're starting to get more complex tones, right? So let's have a listen to that. And you can see that that no longer looks just like a single peak, right? The sine itself is just that, right? It's a single peak, as you can see in the spectrum analyzer right there. But as we speed it up, look at also the oscilloscope showing us the waveform. Let's just make sure that that's static. There you go. So it's showing us the waveform in real time, and you can see all this kind of crazy stuff happening to the waveform. And we can even speed it up even farther. Like if you go over to the LFO and we go to the right, we can make it even faster. This is one thing that's interesting about this LFO. You can go into high rate. So that basically means that the LFO can go into like super fast speeds up to, 12.5 hertz. You can see the amount of hertz in the bottom left of the screen there, right? So, and that's when we're starting to get really interesting tones, right? So again, we're just modulating the pitch with an LFO, right? But it's modulating it so fast that we're creating all these interesting tones. Right? Not very useful at the moment, but you see. So that's basically what's happening in something like FM. In FM, we've got an oscillator that normally is stuck at the bottom, and the ones at the top always modulate the tone. So on this particular one here, you can see that they're all at the bottom, so they all work independently. But you can see on this one here, the one at the bottom is the one we hear, but everything is stuck above it is modulating in turn, right? And you can have one like this one here, that you got three that are stuck at the bottom, that they're not modulating each other, but you got one that's adding more complexity. So what we're doing is we add more complexity. Let's just explore very simple. I'm just going to use this shape here, which is the square shape. Square shape gives us basically like two oscillators that they run in parallel with two modulators stuck at the top, right? So again, we just don't want to complicate things. We just want to make basic sounds just to get a grip on how FM works. And this is the best way to do it, right? So let's just move away from the theory a little bit and let's get into something a little bit more exciting. So let's get a bass line going. So I've got this beat, right? Just in the background there anyway. Not sure if I'm going to use it. I don't know. We'll see. It's just there to create something. Let's find a bass note. I'm going to go for something quite deep. So if you're not using headphones, you're not going to be able to hear this. So please put headphones on, or good headphones, I would say. But let's just go over to, for example, let me just go into like F. Let's go into like a G. right? It's a very DG, but we can also get, I'm going to get Ableton to actually create a pattern for us. So you can see it's going to create a pattern on G1. And yeah, that's good. Actually, no, I want G0. Okay, so G0. And let's just create the pattern. I'm just going to go like this. Let's add more density. So there's a few more notes in there. Let's just hear that. So it's just going to be like if I play that, you're not going to be able to hear much because it's very, very quiet. Again, use headphones to hear this, okay? Right. So one thing that we can do is with B, as we start bringing the level, what we're doing is, you can see at the moment, this is just a simple sine, right? You can see it's just a peak there, right? Not very exciting. So what we can do is we can modulate the pitch of A with B, which is a stack above it, right? With the blue one. But all you have to do is just use your ears, okay? The higher the level, the more modulation, the brighter the modulation is going to be, right? So let's create a baseline. Let's hear a little bit of the pluckiness as well, right? So let's just bring the level up. You can see that kind of looks a little bit like a sawtooth. I don't know if you can see that here on the oscilloscope, right? Nice. This is basically how quick this modulation happens. So we can make it so the modulation happens super ultra quick. And it just adds a little bit of like a pluck. Right? It's just like a pluck at the start. Or we can make it so, I don't know, it adds pluck, but still the modulation carries on throughout the duration of the note. And that's the sound of FM, right? You can hear it right away, right? What else we can do? These numbers here, these QR settings, basically, they work in the harmonic series. They don't work in terms of octaves. So they work in the harmonic series, and basically the harmonic series is just basically multiply one frequency, which is the initial frequency, by the number of the harmonics. So say, for example, you're starting 100, that would be 1. If you then move to number 2, that would be 200, 300, number 4 will be 400 hertz, 500 hertz, etc., right? So we're taking that frequency and we're making it higher, like a higher number, just by multiplying it, right? So just so you're aware, when we move over an octave, right, going up an octave on the keyboard or down an octave, we always double the frequency, right? So you could say like 1 will be like the initial octave, 2 will be like another octave above, 3 wouldn't be an octave, but 4 will be at the next octave above. Does that make sense? So that's how it works in FM. But one thing that you need to know is this: when you play with these numbers, the modulation gets either higher or lower, right? So if we get a higher modulation, you're going to get a distinctive tone, right? So let's just play around with this. You'll see it. So 1 and 1, which is what we're seeing here, is going to give us something that sounds a bit like a sawtooth, right? You can sort of see it. It's too intense because you can see the low end is a little bit too quiet. Can you see that in there? That's because the level is too high, and if you add too much modulation, eventually kind of kills the it adds a lot of frequencies, right? The higher the level, the higher the modulation, the brighter the sound is going to get, the more complexity you add. So with FM, you have to be subtle. It's not about like going crazy and like adding the level really high up and then eventually you're like, no, that doesn't work. Okay, very, very important. It's a mistake that a lot of people make when they use FM synthesizers, and I just thought I'd mention that. Right, so let's just bring it down a little bit. That's obviously too much, right? That's cool. But I still want to hear the lowest sign, right? Which is here. I want to hear that above the others. So you have to lower the level. There you go. So that's a nice bass, right? You can hear that the modulation is adding some energy, but it's not going crazy, right? It's not like suddenly taking over completely and killing the fundamental, right? Killing the main frequency for the sub, for the bass that we're creating, right? So this is very important. But when you play with these numbers, then you get different waveforms, right? So this is very important. If you play with one on the basically it's called the carrier. The one at the bottoms are called carriers. So this is the carrier A, right, which is in yellow. And the one above it is the modulator, which is B, right? The one in blue. Okay. So always the ones above the carriers are called modulators because what they're doing is they modulate the signal. Okay. So you can see the different algorithms here. You can see that, for example, this one here, we only got one carrier at the bottom and 3 modulators stack. Does that make sense? This one here, you will have one carrier, another modulator, and these 2 modulators running in parallel modulating the one below. Hopefully you can see that, right? And if you have a look at, for example, this one here, you can see that we got one carrier and we got 3 modulators that they're running in parallel. So you can get some really crazy sounds. But as I said, just as beginners, we want to just start basic, right? Let's start with that. You can make quite a lot of sounds with just this configuration alone, okay? So this is why I want to emphasize that. So changing the numbers here is going to change the waveform. So if you play with like a carrier of 1 and a modulator of, say, instead of 1, let's use 2, it gives us a typical kind of square sound. That kind of FM bass, right? Now you can sort of really hear it. Let's just bring it up. Nice, right? If we want to make it more aggressive, we can add more level. But remember, the more level that we add, the more complexity, but then it kind of kills the bass away, which is a bit of a shame, right? No bass. You see what I mean? Doesn't sound good. So you have to bring it back. Or if we want more bass, remember that we got C over here. That's also in the same frequency. And that's not being modulated, right? You can see the modulator above it. It's not, right? You can see here the square shape. This one is modulated by the orange, but it's not stand off, so fine. So this one, potentially, we can go crazy. And then we can bring C to add more energy to the low end. Have a listen. Let's bring it so it looks the same, the wave shape in the actual envelope. There you go. So we got double the power, right? Nice. There you go. I'm bouncing now already, right? You can hear it. So that's the thing. So 1 on 1, remember, this is carrier of 1, modulator of 1, sawtooth. With FM, things can get a little bit loud, so always watch out for levels. But for now, I'm not caring so much about the levels. I've got a limiter on the master, right? So I've got a limiter in there. I always do that on all my videos, just in case. And I lower the volume as well, so it doesn't click. So that's the basics. If we go to the, particularly like 1 and 2. We can also make it in a way that the modulation doesn't happen right away, so it kind of sounds a little bit more garagey if we add a little bit of attack. So instead of having like a fast attack, it just sounds more like that is blowing. Can you hear that? Let's solo it so you can, let's take the drums away. So really, really powerful this. Another little trick that you can do. There you go. You must have heard this in a million different tracks. That kind of bass. Right. Another trick that we can do is we can, okay, this is really, really important because not so many people know about this. This is such a wicked trick to try and explore, okay? If you have this kind of configuration where you got a carrier and you got a modulator above, Operator allows you to do this really crazy thing, which is basically the modulator, which is the one that's stuck on the top, can modulate itself. So it's basically feedback. And that can give us even more crazy sounds, right? So let's hear it just to see what it sounds like. I'm going to turn off C so you can hear the modulator really killing the bass, right? Look, right? It's gone down now, right? The only reason why the bass is a little bit higher is because I've got C reinforcing it. Remember that, right? It's a little trick there that I'm just sharing with you, okay? So if we bring the level up, turn this off, that's very strong, right? Like we're not hearing the bass anymore. We're only hearing more of those. Look, if we flatten the spectrum, this is the majority of the energy that we're hearing. The bass note is kind of gone, you know? If we bring C back, we're bringing it up a little bit again, right? But if we add feedback, what's going to happen is we're gonna modulate the modulator, and that's going to give us like an even more complex tone. So it's going to get really, really insane very, very quickly. Look. So it's trying to apply feedback. So much so that when you modulate something extremely, which is what's happening here, what we end up with is noise. Which in a funny way could be interesting, right? I don't know, you could do it like this. Let's just... I mean, that's quite extreme, isn't it? But let's just, let's bring the feedback down. I mean, you could even leave the feedback as it is and then explore the level instead. That's quite cool. Let's bring C back. Notice the difference without the feedback, right? Let's bring the feedback down. You see? When we add feedback, it's all this extra information that comes. Right, let's bring it. Really cool. So it sounds closer to like a sawtooth, right? And we can also play with different frequencies. We can say, okay, let's bring the modulator, instead of being on 2, which is going to give us a square, we can play on 3, and that's going to give us something that's kind of like, sounds a little bit like a triangle wave almost. So that's interesting as well. And if we go really, really high, then it's going to get the energy created is going to be super high in the frequency spectrum. If you want it to be more subtle, bring the level down. Always remember, bring the modulator level down. You can be as subtle as that. That could add like a kind of garagey sort of flavor. I mean, let's bring this envelope back. Again, the volume of the bass is really high up because I haven't done sidechain, but you get the idea, right? So much scope just by playing with this. And things I like to do sometimes is just add expression to the sound, right? So the level can actually change the intensity, right? So if we go to the envelopes here, I can go and play around with the levels here and be like, okay, well, those notes are going to be fine, but maybe this one here is going to have the modulation really high up or something. You see? Maybe let's go lower, see what it sounds like with a lower coarse setting here. So just maybe let's make it into a square wave, okay? Nice. And it sounds fat, right? What we can also do is we can detune the modulator, and that can give us something that sounds a little bit more, I don't know, abstract and artificial. And the fine tuning is here, but yeah, it's kind of like detuning, right? You detune the oscillator on a normal synth, and that can give us some really interesting tones, especially if you explore some weird abstract stuff. Look. Sounds quite good there. Well, you can play with like very subtle detuning, right? You can make it really, really subtle. It sounds kind of angry. Can you hear that? So this is another thing that can be quite creative, right? You see what I mean? That sounds normal. Sounds a bit more angry. Sounds detuned, right? The energy that we're adding is a little bit more abstract, right? So that's basic instructions on how to use FM. And of course, you can explore this in a million different ways. This is obviously for just like a pluck kind of bass, which is the most basic kind of sound that you can get in FM, which is really cool anyway. I never get tired of it, never get bored of it, and you can always explore it. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this quick tutorial. I didn't want to go into too much detail because it's for beginners. I think that's plenty of information for some of you to just kind of like get started, at least just with bass sounds, because it's very obvious how FM works with the bass. But yeah, on to the next one. Maybe just let me know in the comments what you thought of the video. That would be amazing. And if you can subscribe to the channel, will be even better. So I've got you here, and I can let you know when the new videos come out and stuff like this. And also, if you're interested in music tuition, I teach Ableton Live as well. So if you fancy having me as your personal tutor, let me know. Okay, so I will be sharing more stuff as well about my future releases. I've got my own label as well. So yeah, I will be disclosing all of that very soon on another video. All right, guys, so take care, and I will see you soon.